Okay, welcome to another episode of iTestimony. And today we have Rick with us, and Rick's going to tell us about his story. So Rick, why don't you first of all just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm a retired science teacher, and of course that science played a big role in my background as a Christian. I'm also an artist. I like to paint and draw and do mixed media materials. In fact, I've got homemade paper mache furniture here. I'm also an author. I published 2 novels, ready to publish a 3rd one, and also working on a 4th one. So I'm staying busy in that respect. Retirement has not really slowed me down a whole lot. I just have plenty to do, a lot of interest, and just enjoying what's going on around me and seeing what the world has to offer. So that's basically me.
Okay. Why don't you give us a brief introduction to your novels? What are they about?
Okay, well, they're science-based fiction, and I use that term in place of, or in contrast to science fiction. Like Star Wars is science fiction kind of a thing. But these are fictional stories with a science basis. They deal with, actually they're focused on creatures that are supposedly extinct and turned out not to be extinct after all. And it just follows a group of guys working on this and following this up and getting involved in activities, discovering these things and even solving some mysteries that go along with it. So far, the 3 books I've got, they're all separate books, but they do follow the same thread with the same characters, so they can be looked at as a continuous story.
Okay. And you've got kind of a trilogy right now?
Yeah, at this point, but with the 4th one in the works, I guess trilogy is kind of disqualified at this point. It does deal with issues of relating science and faith. We very often separate those 2 things, that you can't, believe in God and believe in science or vice versa. But yeah, they do work very closely together. And science has a role to play in our belief in God and our faith has a big role to play in how we view science.
Okay. And I know that 2 of the books are already out there, and a 3rd one will be soon.
Right.
So what are the titles of you?
Okay, the first 2 that are out there right now, they're called The Rift and Willow Creek. And the 3rd one that's coming out very shortly is called Cold Trail. And then there's a 4th one I'm working on right now, actually is going to be set in northern Minnesota up on the Canadian border here, called Shadow Walker. That will again follow the same thread.
Okay. And just for the record, your name is Rick Daly.
Right.
So that's the author name that you'll want to look for if you want to look for those books.
And people misspell both of them all the time. It's R-I-C-D-A-L-Y.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So Rick, tell us a little bit how you were raised in relation to faith. Did you grow up going to church at all?
Well, I kind of grew up going to church, but not because that's what my family did. Okay, I went because it was kind of an escape for me, because it was a very difficult upbringing. I had a stepmother, was a little bit abusive verbally and emotionally, not physically. And we didn't get along real well, and so my family was not a church-going family, not very strong in faith, and so I just found that I got involved in my church youth group as a kid, and not really believing anything as far as faith goes, but just being involved in church-type things. I went through quite a few years, going all the way to college, having this sort of attraction to church, but without any of the substance, without any of the belief that goes with it. There's a kind of a sort of religion, but no real faith kind of a thing.
Okay. So would you say it was the family dynamic going on that kind of drove you to church?
Yeah, there was not a whole lot positive in the family. I didn't do much with my dad at all. We just didn't do things as a family, and because I got involved with the youth group at church, it was my rebellion to the family was to get involved in the church, which is kind of backwards for many people.
Right.
I rebelled by doing that and getting away from family situations and getting involved in church activities.
Okay. So what took you from just kind of going to church as a rebellion from your upbringing to actually fully committing yourself to Christ?
That commitment didn't come until I was in college. I was a 21-year-old college student at Mankato State University in Mankato, Minnesota. And there were a couple of guys that used to come into my dorm room and visit with me, and they would come and talk to me about things in the Bible. And my first response was, I know this stuff, but this isn't Sunday school. That was my attitude. And I was not real open to it, but they just maintained this friendship with me and kept coming and talking to me and sharing with me. And then one night I went to a meeting with them, a group called the Navigators on campus. And there were a lot of other college kids there, kids my age, and they were sharing their experience with Jesus. And I thought, wow, I don't have that. And I said, I really need that in my life. And so I went back to my dorm room and just prayed and committed myself that this is what I want in my life from now on. And I read through the Gospel of John, and something changed. There was no earthquake, no lightning flashes, no bells ringing, but something changed. And I realized that this, playing games all these years and being church-oriented without the faith didn't really have anything for me. And suddenly this commitment put me into a relationship with Jesus, and that made a huge difference for me.
Okay. So talk about some ways in which your life has changed since you making your commitment to Christ. Maybe some ways in which having that relationship with Christ has help you overcome adversity in your life, stuff like that.
Okay, well, probably the major thing for me, the most obvious thing, is relating to other people. No longer isolating myself so much and being cut off from people. I was very shy. And although I was involved in a church youth group, it was more as on the sidelines than anything else. And as a Christian, I become more outgoing, relating to people, more caring toward people, just a more outgoing, more positive attitude. And along with that, I'm a lot more positive in other aspects of what I'm doing, things I'm involved in. I was talking to someone the other day, in fact, a medical interview on the phone. It's just a positive attitude. I just look at things, I don't see all the negative stuff that can impact me. I see what's positive about things and I go with that. And as a result, when I'm faced with adversity, it's like so what? We can roll with this and just allow God to take control and do what He does. So it's been a big change in the way I view things, just looking at things positively and recognizing that God's the one really in control.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about what drove you to become a science teacher.
Well, that's interesting because I began college actually as an English major.
Okay.
And that's what I was going to do. As far as being a teacher, I think I kind of grew up assuming that was going to happen. It was never a decision I had to worry about there. But what I was going to teach was the issue. And I liked English and I liked geography. I began in that area. But then when I became a Christian, I realized just how much this creation is involved in science and vice versa. And as I looked at science, I looked at God's creation, I saw a really incredible connection between the two, the way they kind of spliced together. And science provided a really good way to understand God and what God was doing in the universe. And I began to look at things like the stars, the galaxies, and the planet itself, and just things that were happening. And I realized I can use science to follow up on this, to follow through with this. And so my major then changed from English, and I went into science as a result. And I think science is a great way to express how I view God, how I feel about God, about creation. And just, to me, provides a really good explanation of things. And
Okay.
I like it.
Well, tell us a little bit about how your faith has influenced your approach to teaching science.
I think probably the greatest thing was, as a Christian, I became a Christian before I began teaching, so all my teaching career has been as a Christian. And it's affected my attitude toward the students, for one thing. I view students as individuals that I really cared about and want to see them educated. But I also presented science with an understanding that God is behind this. I'm not sure how else to put that. It's just that It's how I talk to students. I present myself to students, and kids, of course, picked up on this. They realize that there's a real caring here. Not all teachers convey that to their kids, and students realize this. And so I was able to relate well with students. I found as a teacher, both in Arizona and in Florida, that many times I had students come in asking questions about the Bible, about God, about Jesus, and we sit down and talk about these things. And these are things that, of course, as a non-Christian, I could never have done as a teacher. But as both a science teacher and a Christian, then I can talk about these things and share them, relate them to kids, and help them see that.
So have you had to deal with any, because of your faith-based perspective on science, have you had to deal with any adversity because of that?
Not really, not as a teacher, because the schools I taught in both Arizona and Florida were really open to that presentation in science. In fact, my classroom walls had Christian posters up. Students knew where I stood as a Christian and as a scientist, and so they'd ask related questions in the classroom, and I could answer them. So I didn't find any real problems with that, no adversity. I don't recall ever being stifled in presenting anything from that perspective.
Well, that's great. Tell us a little bit about the presentation you've developed regarding faith and science.
Okay, well this goes again back to the relationship between science and creation. I've got a presentation called The Glory of God. And we take a look at the universe that God has put together with a scientific approach to it. Basically looking at stars and galaxies, exactly what these are, the immensity of this creation. We often will look at the stars and things out there and we'll, wow, those are pretty amazing, but we don't have a real grasp on how big things are and how far away they are and how fast things are moving and what God has done to put all this together and maintain that. I think one of my favorite verses is in Colossians 1:17 says, "In Him all things hold together." We see God as a creator. And we look at the immensity of the galaxies and the stars out there. Our galaxy contains roughly 400 billion stars. And that's a number that's just difficult to comprehend, to realize the numbers involved. The Bible talks about the stars being as the grains of sand on the beaches, and they are. And so I'm really impressed with these numbers, both the sizes, the distances, the spans of time, the speed with which things move around in the universe. And that God just holds all this together. So I love the science aspect of looking at creation. And then so as a scientist, I find that this looking at creation is really an awesome thing. And being able to see this creation, then I can think, well, science is really fascinating. So they really enhance each other.
Right. Yeah, oftentimes science and faith are kind of portrayed as being opposed to one another, but you really seem to have a opposite view of that.
Yeah, they work together. I was teaching in Arizona one day, and a couple of my boys came in during my lunch break, and well, the guy says, "Mr. D, you're not a Christian, are you?" And I thought, where is this coming from? And I said, "Why do you say that?" And he says, "Well, Mike says you're a scientist, and scientists can't be Christians." So I just said, "Boys, have a seat, let's talk." And we talk about this. Scientists can be Christians and vice versa. They don't have to be exclusive.
Right.
And I think that's my big push, is that science and faith do in fact enhance each other.
Right. Okay. One thing, of course, we've known each other for a long time, and one thing I've noticed is that you seem to have a gift for communicating and relating to young people, and no doubt that comes from years of teaching. But you still, even though you're retired from teaching, you still seem to be able to do that. And just tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Well, first of all, I taught high school science for 31 years. And so I've had a lot of years working with young people. And I just find that very rewarding. And now that I'm retired, I still work with kids because I see that there's a great potential there. A lot of adults have a hard time talking to kids, either understanding them or being understood by them. And although I'm becoming an elderly person very quickly, I'm not a young guy anymore. But teaching either ages you or keeps you young. It kept me with that young attitude, thinking young. But again, realizing that these kids have value, that they need this understanding of what the world is all about. And I just really enjoy sharing this. I worked with kids in various churches and other youth groups, teaching classes and just encouraging, providing some counseling. All I can say is I really enjoy doing that. I think there's a reward in that, and God can use that, and He needs people that can do that.
Okay. Has faith influenced your art?
Oh yeah. I do a lot of different things. I've done portraits, I've done landscapes, I've done all kinds of things, but there are a lot of ways that I incorporate my belief, my faith into the artwork itself, using, for example, Hebrew text. But I think that the main thing is when I sit down to do some art, whether it's drawing or painting something, I approach that first of all with an attitude that God is doing this with me. I pray about it, ask God to guide me, and I do the work understanding that I'm doing it for God. And that, of course, determines what I do and how I do it. And I think that's the main thrust of success in being creative, is allowing God free reign in that. I like creativity, doing painting and writing, whatever, because we're made in God's image. And what is God? He's a creator. So we create. And so when I create something, art, writing, whatever, I approach that with that in mind, with God in mind, that this is God working on this.
All right. So, generally, I end these interviews by asking people to just say anything else they'd like to say. But I think in your case specifically, since you have such a history of working with young people, if there were young people watching this video, what would you want to say to them?
Oh, that's a good question, because I can't think of a blanket statement other than just, look at the universe out, look at this world, and look what God has created. And allow yourself to be a productive part of that creation. Let God work in your life. Watch what happens.
Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but
Oh, it makes sense, yeah.
Don't limit God.
Right.
For one thing.
Right. So you're, let's see, you're going to be 70
in about 3 weeks.
in about 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, so you've lived a lot of life already. But what do you have hopes of things you'd like to do yet?
Oh, yeah. Well, I got more books to publish.
Yeah.
More art to do. I love traveling. Not flying around the world, but getting in my car and going someplace. I want to drive back and visit friends in Florida and Washington and Kentucky and wherever else, and just go visit people. I'm not going to sit and stagnate just because I'm old and retired. I'm going to keep doing things. Yeah. And but right now the main thing I'm doing is getting this third book ready for publishing, and working on the fourth one, and just keep going as long as I can do that.
Yeah, I've noticed your travels tend to influence your art as well. You take a lot of pictures while you're out on the road.
Yeah.
And
So when I do that, I end up doing paintings of either palm trees or pine trees or beaches and different things like that. I like to paint the things I've seen.
Yeah.
And I do some work with portrait. I have a unique portrait style doing paintings, and
Okay.
I like to do that.
All right. If you could offer up something that you would say, when people look back and go, "Oh, this Rick Daly guy, who was he?" What's the most important thing you'd want people to know?
I've thought about that recently. What legacy do I want to leave? I just want people to think of me as a man who loved Jesus. Period. Because with that, everything else is just kind of together. I don't want to remember it as a great writer, which I'm not necessarily, or a good artist, or a musician, which I definitely am not. Doesn't mean I won't sing, but I'm just not a musician. But that I love Jesus, and that everything else just kind of falls in, and that's the legacy I want to leave behind.
That's a good legacy. All right. Anything else you want to say?
Not at this point.
Not at this point.
I'll think of things after the camera's turned off.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Okay, great. Enjoyed it.